Looks like everyone's good. So thanks for attending, everyone. Um, looks like a lot of you are from New Zealand, so hopefully you're all faring well working from home. Thanks for joining. I said that already. My name's Josh Osborne, and I'm the product manager for the CI Tools. And welcome to the CI Tools weekly Q&A webinar. Normally this webinar just goes through a couple of questions or requests for how-tos that we've had on the support desk over the week beforehand to cover off some areas that you might not know about in the tools and that sort of thing. Today we're going to be looking at some things to do with the top and bottom shapes of doors and windows, some unusual things that you can do with those for certain cases that you might need to do. It might just be something that you haven't used before, so we'll go through the options that are available there, and then we're also going to look at the CI electrical tool, how to use that, how to draw up circuits, that sort of thing. If you do have any questions about any of the tools, in general, or any questions about this webinar specifically, just enter those in the chat panel as we go. And at the end, if there's any of those that I can answer live, I'll do that. And if there's any of them that involve a bit more, a bit longer of a response, I'll deal with those in the next version of this weekly webinar. So if you think of anything at all as you go through, just pop those into the chat panel and I'll get to those at the end. But yeah, so I'm going to be using ArchiCAD 24 today, but all of the things that I'm going to show you today have been the same for a very long time. The electrical tool works very much the same as it has done for the last couple of versions. There's been odd updates and features added over time, but fundamentally the way that the tool actually works, which is what we're going to be looking at today, has been pretty much the same. And the doors and windows shapes that we're going to look at, those have been the same in the door and window tool for in the region of 12 to 13 years or so. So if you're using pretty much any version of ArchiCAD with that, what we're looking at today will apply there as well. As I said, I am working from home today because we're back in lockdown, so apologies if I get any strange cat sound effects or Minecraft noises or anything like that. That is normal, and just don't worry about it. But anyway, let's get started. So doors and windows, one of the queries that we had this week was just asking about how to make certain types of top or bottom shape using the doors and windows. And it's just something that I thought would be worth looking at the various things that you can do. More so that you know that they're available if you do need to make one of them. So I'm just going to go and have a look, and you've probably come across this section before and never had to change it from what it is by default. But let's go and have a look. So in our door and window settings, going to the shape setting here. And you can see that by default, the head shape and the sill shape are both set to flat, which in 99% of cases is probably all you need. However, there are extra options for us to do strange things with our windows and doors. So let's just quickly have a look at those. So if I click on the drop down here, you can see that there's a range of different shapes that we can use. And obviously, you can just use them exactly as they sound like. So falling to right does pretty much what it sounds like it would do. Oh, I think I may have had it set to not do anything. Yes, so we select that, and you can see that everything's set to 0 by default, so it is still flat. But we can go in here and we can say, let's mark our C value, which is the height of the fall. Let's set it to 333, and then flick over to the preview just so that you can see that's what that will look like if we do that. So we can go through and we can change it to whatever we need. So having an angled top is it's actually relatively common compared to the other types that are in here. And you can see as I entered the value for the drop here, it automatically calculated the angle there, so it's 10.48 degrees, but you can go the other way as well. So if you wanted to come in here and say you wanted it to drop by 15 degrees, but you don't know what the actual distance is for that, type in the angle instead and it'll automatically calculate the the distance of the drop. So you can do either way. And then we've got the A and B options here, which will let you step it in from either side if you want to as well. So we can set that to 400, say, and then go and have a look, and you'll see it's stepped in that much. So if you have, like in this case, we've got two sets of, I guess, columns in the window, you could set it to the same width as your right side so that it was only lower on that side and then angled up to full height on the other side using that control, and it'll let you step from the other side as well. The falling to left option does pretty much exactly the same thing, except it's on the other side of the window. The arch option will do exactly what it sounds like it will do. So it's just going to arch the whole top of the window, and you've got controls for, again, you've got your A and B controls for the step on either side. Those are going to appear in pretty much every setting here. And then the C and D controls control the actual height of the arch on each side. So you can have different height arches on each side if you want to. So we could set this one to something different, and then if we go and have a look, you'll see that that has a steeper arch than the other side does. The cut corners option is kind of similar to the arch. No, that's the rounded corners. The cut corners obviously just chamfers the corners off your window, and it has the same settings again. So the A and B, rather than being a step this time, are just the distance in that the cut is, and the C and D value are the distance down that the cut is. So you can see these ones aren't quite at right angles, but you can set those to the same values for that. We don't have angle values for these ones, so you will need to figure it out in your head beforehand. But I'm sure if you remember your third form maths classes, that shouldn't be any trouble. Then we've got the gable option, which will let you make a nice pointy top. You can see there. And that has the same step values on the sides, A and B. The C and D height will let you set the actual drop down there, and the E value will let you set the midpoint of that. So this is 900, which is just half the size of my total window, but you can adjust that to whatever you need to. So if you want to make it skewed to one side, you can do that, and it'll just twist it across to wherever it needs to go. Then we've got the Gothic arch and the elliptical arch options, which work very similarly, except that the elliptic is elliptic and the Gothic is Gothic, I guess. I'm not sure how to describe that. It's kind of an arc with a pointy top. And those are controlled in very much the same way as everything else. So you can see E is going out to the midpoint of the two sides. A and B are both the offsets, and C and D are the size of the drop down. Obviously, if you wanted to make a Gothic arch that covered the whole size of the window, just set the drop down to be the same size as the actual height of your window. So if we set that to 1350 on both sides, you'll have a nice arch that does the entire shape of the window if that's what you're after. The parabolic arch also works in kind of a similar way. So you can see we have similar settings to before, and we've got this arch. It looks quite similar to the arch, but this is a parabolic one instead of just a flat, just a even curve, I guess you'd call it. And so you can see we've got our same A and B settings for the offsets here, and C and D for the drops, but you can see it's the way that it curves is in this parabolic shape so that you can achieve that. And the rounded corners is going to do quite similarly to the arch is, only it's further out, so it's at the edges, and the controls for that look pretty much the same as the cut corners option did. So you can see we've got A and B settings for the inward length and C and D for the drop down on each corner. So obviously, if you wanted to, for some reason, make this go all the way across, you could make these both the total width of your window, and that would give you, oops, if I can just keep up with my own typing. No, sorry, those were 900, weren't they? 900. and then I entered them in the wrong fields. You can see what I did wrong there, but you can also see that that has done them to the total height of the windows as well. So if you wanted to do that, you can do. And if I set those to actually what I was saying I was going to do, you can see what that will look like as well, which is essentially the same as the arch top. So there's different ways of getting to the same thing, but just knowing what you can do with these will give you an idea of if you get a request to do something a little bit weird later, you'll know how to do it. You could make one that looks like the arch but is uneven by changing the values there, all that sort of thing. And then the last two here are the step options. The steps setting here doesn't actually have any values shown here because there could be a lot of them, and so those are displayed in this array setting here. So if I click this button, it's going to show me an array starting with 0, then 300, then 600, then 900, then back down to 600. So that's the default array setting there. And if I have a look at my window, you'll see that it's done two steps here. So the steps are calculated based on the the columns in your glazing. So this one is full height and this one is stepped down by 300. And if I went through to my glazing panel layout and added more columns, so we've got 4 columns now. And they were set to, what were they? 300, 600, 900. That's what we should be seeing now. Yep. I wrecked my window a little bit by clicking too many times on that glazing addition button, but you can see the way that the stepping works there. And then the last one there was Polygon, which works very, very similarly to the stepping option. Whoops. Actually, I'll put in another one of these while we're here, just so that the Polygon one is easier to see. So Polygon looks the same as the steps from the top here. You've got an array setting, so you can come through and see what is set up in there, but you can also set it out down here. So you can see at the moment I have panel 1 selected, and there's options all the way up to panel 3 because that's how many I have. If you have 5 panels, it'll show you up to 5 panels. So you can go through and select them, and the difference between the Polygon option and the step one is just that the Polygon one will let you change both ends of it. So you can see panel 1 is set to 0, panel 2 is set to 300, and panel 3 is set to 600. So at the moment it will look exactly like the steps did. But then you can do things like you can go in here and you can say that actually panel 2 should be 0 on one side and it should be 600 at the other, and that should make it draw a sort of a falling to the right panel in the middle with a standard one on each side. So this is the kind of thing that we often do get requests for, is making something quite unusual shaped, and using the Polygon option will allow you to get the control that you need to do that sort of thing quite easily. And then the sill shape options are very similar to the top shape ones. So there's a couple of tricks that you can do now that you sort of know what you're doing in here. So one of the things that comes up occasionally is wanting to draw a circular window, which as you may know, you can't do normally. And what we can do is here, we can say that we're going to use an arch. Our overall height is 1350, which, if I can do maths, is 675. Of course it is. So let's make that 675 on each side. And you can see that that has done a nice curve on the top there. And then you can just reproduce the same thing on the bottom to make a circular or whatever sort of shape that you need. So let's make the bottom an arch, and we'll make it That's fine, 338, and you'll see that it draws that as well. So you can produce some quite unusual shapes. Obviously the arch is not going to be circular because our window isn't square, but if you set your window to be square and then set those values all to be equal, it will give you a circular window. So you can use this to go through and make some unusual shapes in that way, especially if you are doing curved windows. And another one of the things that you can use in here is using the cut corners option. So normally the cut corners would look like this if it was on each side, but one of the things that I have had customers ask about is drawing a trapezoidal window, and essentially what you can do is you can use the cut corners option here, and instead of this part here being the top of the window and this part here being the bottom, we offset these edges here so that this is actually the top and this is the bottom, and it will just sort of skew the entire window, which is something that I've come across a few people wanting to do. So we set our A value to 0 and our B value to, how wide was it again? 1800. Let's set that to 1500. You'll see that that sort of stretches the top across, and then you can do the similar thing with the bottom, and it'll essentially give you a kind of a sideways window, which you can, obviously the idea is just you can get up to some quite weird stuff with this, and using the settings that are available here, that was D, and then B, like that. No, I entered those the wrong way around. Sorry, I'm trying to do maths in my head as I go, which is obviously not ideal. Oh, it's because it should be this one here. Yeah, so that will let you produce that sort of unusual shape window. Often it's for things like you have a roof that is obviously on an angle that's directly above it, and you want to match the angle of that. In the case where I had the person asking for this sort of shape, it was a window above one roof but also below another, and so it needed to have an angled top and bottom, and so using this sort of cut corners trapezoid making system allows you to do that. So just to give you an idea of the different things that you can do, you're not limited to just the shapes that are here, because you can make a lot of things using what is available. If you do come across something that you can't make, it's also worth mentioning it to us as well, because we can put in new feature additions to be able to do all sorts of unusual things that you might need. But I'm pretty sure you can cover off pretty much anything that I've seen, at least, using the settings that are available here. All right, so that's the door and window top and bottom shapes. The second thing I wanted to look at was the electrical tool, and we've only got 10 minutes left, but it's a nice and quick and easy tool to show you how to use. So basically what I want to show you is placing some symbols down which have wall plates attached, and wiring them up, and then moving some of the parts around and having our wiring follow them. So that's the thing that the electrical tool is designed to do. It's designed as a nice quick way to draw up your symbols, to wire up your symbols, to have your wall plates show in section elevation in 3D and that sort of thing. The intention with the electrical tool is not to produce everything electrical in your building. It doesn't have incinerator objects or light fittings or anything like that, because there's so many other places that you can get those already. There's not really much point in us producing a bunch of our own, which wouldn't turn out to be the brand that you want or something like that. So the idea here is that you just wire up existing objects that you already have, and the electrical tool provides the symbols for that and the way to connect them to each other. So the main way that you use it is through the electrical tool here in your toolbox, which will be there if you apply our work environment. In ArchiCAD 24, it's just called CI Tools Profile 24. If you apply that, you'll get this electrical switch here, and you can just select the tool, come in here and choose what localization you want. I'm going to go with NZ Australia for now, and choose what symbol you want. So I'm going to just go with the light switch. You can see by default it's showing us a single light switch panel in elevation and in 3D. and in floor plan it's showing the symbol and the elevation here. So you can see we've got a couple of settings to control size of the plate and the elevation of the plate. So D is the elevation, and it's set to measure the height to the top of the plate. So this is saying it's 1200 to the top of the plate. If you don't measure it usually to there, you can change that to whatever it needs to be though. You can also set the angle here. 90 degrees is the sort of, I guess you would call it portrait orientation of the plate. And if you wanted to change to landscape, you can just hit this button here, which will automatically flip it, or you can rotate it using the angle here, so you can make it be something other than a right angle if you needed to. Then we've got the number of switches and the number of rows. So if I change this to a 2, you'll see 2 switches on here. And if I change this to a 2 and leave that as 2, you'll see there are 2 rows now. If I change this to 4, there will be 2 rows of 2 and so on. So you can go through and build up as much as you need. 3, not going to do 3 because 3 isn't going to fit in the grid that I have, but if I do 4, I think it might spread them all out, yes, which looks horrible, so don't do that. But you can use those controls there to go through and make the panel have whatever you need it to. And then if you flip back to the symbol view, you'll see that it has updated to reflect that as well. So we've got our symbol there and it's got a 4 next to it, so you can tell that there's that many of them in it. You can then go and have a look and see specifically what all the switches are. So it's set, this is just a further detailed setting for that layout. So you can see number of switches 4, number of rows 2, and the spacing is 33 between each, which is fine. And then the individual switches, you can see because there's 4 of them, there are 4 showing here. But if you change the number, the amount available here will change, obviously. And you can change what specifically each switch is. So they default to one way, one pole, but you can change this to whatever you need them to be. And if you do that, the symbol will update. So I've changed switch 1 to be 2-pole. So you can see it has a 2-pole symbol now, and then the 1-pole one is still there, and there's 3 of that one. So you can make that look however you need it to. You can change the way that the symbols work as well. So lots of settings to do with how it displays, whether it's round, square, or hexagonal, all sorts of things, and the pen color as well. You can choose how you want the label to look. At the moment, you can see it's labeled with just 1200, and that's because we have a model view setting for that, but you can override that and make it say whatever you like. So at the moment, it's set to none, but we can say, let's have 2 items. The first thing will be the height above reference, which is the 1200 we were seeing before. And the second thing can be current rating. Sure, let's leave that as is. You can see the other options that are available. You can show the ID or the size of the plate or something like that. And you can add prefixes before all of these and something in between as well if you need to, just to make it that look sensible. So you can control that however you need to, or just leave it as model view options and set those globally in your model view. And then you can control the way that the label is laid out as well, and the formatting, obviously. And then the last thing here is the product data, which lets you add in a bunch of other useful information that you might want it to have. These don't affect much of the way that it actually displays, because it's just sort of metadata on this specific thing, but they can be shown with the labels. So you can see current rating 10 amps. That's selected there, that's why that's showing, but you can change that to whatever you need to and it'll update. And the same for the voltage and the code. If you need to use those as well, you can change that to custom, add your custom code in there, and then have that labeled as well. But now that we've got the plate that we wanted, we can go and place it in the floor plan. And this is one of the things that's intended to just stop you from having to pull out your hair while you're drawing up electrical plans, and that is that it will automatically snap and rotate the symbols. So, excuse me, just hold down the space bar, move over to one of the walls that you want to place it near, and then click. And you can see it's automatically rotated the symbols to the orientation of that wall and snapped them hard up onto the wall. If you go up here and do the same, it will do the same. and down below it'll do the same there. So it will just match whatever you need it to do. And now that we've got a handful of these drawn up, we can then select. So this is where you'd get the object for whatever it is that you want to wire up. Let's go with a coffee machine. So this obviously could be anything. It could be a chandelier or something. Whoops, that's on the wrong level. It could be lights, it could be a switchboard, it could be whatever you want. The tool is just looking for an object. So it can be, an object or a lamp. If you use lamps for them as well, it'll find those too. So we just select the object that we want to wire up, and then we select the things that we want it wired up to. So I'm going to select those 3 switches, and then go to the CI Tools menu, down to Electrical, and choose Add Wiring. And now it gives me some options to control how the wiring is drawn on. So the path is automatic. That's fine by me. I don't want to draw it manually. The wire bending is also automatic, and it's set to 800 at the moment. You'll see what that looks like in a second, but this value essentially chooses how much of a bend you want it to show with. If you don't want it to bend at all, then just set that to 0 and it will make the lines straight. And this style, which is just using the spline tool's default settings at the moment. So I'm going to leave that as is, but if you wanted to override it, you can do. And it's going on the ArchiCAD layer by default, which isn't ideal. So you should probably set that to something sensible. I don't think I have an electrical. Here we go. There's file links. I'm going to leave that as the ArchiCAD layer by default here. That's fine for the cases of the demo, but you should set that to a electrical layer of some sort. Then just hit OK, and it'll go through and draw those lines. So this is the curve that it was asking about here. That's the curve factor that it was using, and you can see it's just drawn splines between each of our elements. So the switches are wired to each other. These two are wired to each other instead of directly to this because it sees them as closer, and this one is wired directly in. And the other sort of removing your need to pull out your hair thing is that when we move around the element that we wired up, it moves the wiring as well. So you don't have to go back and reroute everything. You can still do that if you want to, but basically the idea is just to make it so that you don't have to do that anymore. So you can move that around, and you can also move the symbols around, and your wiring will follow them around. So that's the sort of the main functions of the electrical tool, is just the ease of placement, configurability of the plates and everything, and the automated wiring following around thing. And obviously, if you go and have a look in 3D, there's our coffee machine sitting on the floor there. You should be able to see the switches. That one's in a window, so that's not ideal. There should be another one over here somewhere. Yep, there it is. So you can see it makes a pretty decent looking 3D switch, which is going to look fine in your renders and everything, and will also display correctly in your elevation views. So that should get you to be able to produce all of your drawings from that pretty much as it is. You won't have to go through and draw up symbols and then separately draw wall plates or anything like that. So that's the electrical tool. I'm just going to quickly have a look at the questions panel now, but if you do have any questions that you have thought of, just enter those now, and I'll see what we've got. All right, so a couple of people asking about ArchiCAD 25. We are still working on the ArchiCAD 25 tools. I don't have an update for you just yet. I hope to have one very soon. We are definitely still working on them. We're trying to get them ready as soon as we can, but at this stage, not ready to release them just yet. I am hopeful by this time next week during the webinar that I might be able to give you a better idea, but I can't really say that for sure just because of the nature of testing and retesting things and development and that sort of thing. But we are definitely working on it as our absolute highest priority, yes. Are we working on the wall covering tool, working on complex profiled walls? No. I have had probably 2 or 3 people ever ask about wall coverings on complex profile walls. So uh, at, with that amount of demand, it's not something that we are looking at developing because it seems that almost no one wants it. If there are a lot more people that want it, please do let me know. The problem with complex profile walls is the same as the problem that we have with angled walls, which is that it's extremely difficult to figure out the intersections for those. So if you're using a straight wall, obviously the intersection point just means that you go around a corner at whatever angle the intersection is, and that's all it needs to do. So for the coverings, it just miters them on the corner. With a complex profile wall, we have no way of knowing how you want that to wrap around. And so making it handle that is just an incredibly time consuming, and it would be a very large development project to do it. And at the moment, as I say, I've had maybe 2 or 3 people ever ask me if it's possible, and about the same for slanted windows. So it just doesn't seem like it's a good use of the time when 99.9% of the coverings customers don't actually want to do that. But if it is something that you do want to do, it would be great to hear specifically what sorts of custom profiles you are using that you want it to apply on. We might be able to make something that works on it in a very limited sense and just doesn't wrap or something like that. But yeah, at this stage, it is not on the cards simply because it is a very large project that would only benefit a handful of people in the world, so far as I can tell. All right, it looks like so the reason that you are not seeing the ArchiCAD 25 option in the CI Tools installer is just because we haven't released them for that yet. Are we looking at roof coverings for curved roof shapes? We actually have had quite a few people asking for that. It's a little bit difficult because a lot of the time people do curved roofs now as using the shell tool, which is an extremely different thing than the roof tool is. As you might know, if you used to use the old, I can't remember when the shell tool came in, but back before then, we used to draw roofs using the roof tool and just a really multifaceted roof. The roof coverings will still work on those types of roofs. So if you draw a roof that is curved by just a bunch of flat facets in a curved shape, the roof covering will apply fine to those. But if you are using a shell, it can't deal with that at all at the moment. I've had quite a few people ask about that, and it is something that we have started exploring, but it would essentially be a rewrite of the tools. So we may do that in future. At this stage, not really the demand for it that I would want for the enormous amount of time that it would involve. But yeah, definitely something that I will look into some more. I might actually get in contact with you after this and just see specifically what sorts of things, because again, if we could implement it in a sort of a limited sense for only certain types of curves, that might be a bit more doable, because it is to do with the intersections and that sort of thing that actually make it the most difficult. And yeah, so I see, as you're saying, in the case of the complex profile walls, yeah, if it is just a straight profile wall, but it has framing in it, so technically it's a complex profile, but it still essentially looks like a straight wall, there may be a way that we can force the covering to work on something like that, because it would just need to, essentially we could just put in an option to say treat complex profile wall as straight, and then it could just assume that it was straight. You probably have to enter an offset for the origin point of your complex profile, because I don't think it'll be able to pick up what the width is of your complex profile, but definitely we could look into doing something like that. So I'll add that to the wish list, actually, if we could do a, yes, that's right. It does offset at the moment, and I think that's why, is because it doesn't know what the width is. So if we could just say to enter an offset value so that you could offset it back in again, that would probably do the trick for straight walls like that. I don't think doing any other kind of complex profiles would be something that would be useful to a lot of people, or doable even. But definitely, if we could have an offset just to account for that sort of thing, I think that would be worthwhile. I'll enter that into our wish list now, and we can look into doing it for a future update. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. That's a good couple of questions there. If you do think of anything else, obviously email those through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com, and we can we'll either answer them on the support desk, or we can look at answering them in future versions of this webinar. But thanks everyone for coming, and the recording will be available up on MyCI about this time next week.